us today. It's super excited to be back. It's super exciting, excuse me, to be back here in Charlotte, where my Tableau journey began. Today, I'm the Vice President of Product Marketing at a company called Wiiisdom. We'll get to what that is in just a little bit. But I've only been a part of the team for about 3 months now. Prior to this, I was at Tableau for about 5 years, where I spent some time doing customer success for different financial services organizations in the UN globally, and then eventually I went on to lead a little body of work called Tableau Blueprint, which I'll talk about in just a little bit here. But before that, I was an employee at Bank of America. I was in the military for about a decade, got hooked up with an internship at Bank of America while I was doing my MBA. And in that internship, I learned about Tableau, and boy, I was hooked from the moment that I first saw it. I've always been like this partly creative guy, this partly analytical guy, and Tableau seemed to be like this wonderful tool that would allow me to do sort of both without having to learn, yet another coding language. So, so for me, it's very exciting to be back here in Charlotte, just like meeting with customers today and spending a little bit of time with y'all here tonight, telling the story about what, fundamentally we're doing here now at Wiiisdom, but also learning some tips and tricks from the master of the gang himself. So yeah, super excited to be here. I'm joined by my esteemed colleagues, Ace and Michael. Do you guys want to introduce yourselves? We have a slide with our pictures, by the way. Let's go to that. That's very official.
That's me. My name is Ace. My name is Ehsan, which means doing good in Farsi. That's where my background is, and that's what we're here to do. So I also come from the world of Tableau. I worked in Tableau for 5 years in the professional services team, where I had a chance to work with Michael directly. And my role at Tableau was very similar to my role with Wiiisdom, which is helping our customers with their most complex challenges and finding ways to integrate within their ecosystems, helping them use our tool in their benefit. And I've been with the Wiiisdom team now for about 3 months also, where I've been pretty hands-on with helping our customers adopt the tool, learn more about it, going on these tugs with Jeremy and showcasing some of what we've been up to. And yeah, I'm excited to give you all a demo towards the end of this as well, so you can kind of get a sense of what Wiiisdom looks and feels like in the analytics ecosystem. And yeah, Michael, if you want to give the...
So obviously, I know these guys. I worked at Tableau as well, built out their financial services customer success vertical, and so I'm building out a customer success vertical at Wiiisdom. I have a long history in financial services. I worked at Bloomberg for 11 years. I was a CFO there. I worked at Mizuho and Citibank and UBS, a lot of the institutions on the street. In a lot of different capacities. I've been using Tableau since early 2009. I've rolled it out externally as well as internally for as many use cases as you can even count. And so excited to be here. I think what we're doing at Wiiisdom is really compelling, and it helps the Tableau ecosystem. And so interested to hear what you think about it.
All new Tableau employees go to a thing called boot camp. At least they did prior to the post-acquisition. There's no boot camp, but Michael and I went to boot camp together and spent some time together traveling the world, spent some time in London together, India, and a couple of other places.
Boot camp was the first time he had oysters. I introduced him to oysters.
Love oysters now.
And he was like, he didn't want to do it. And then I was like,
It's super
they're really good. He tried, he was like, oh, these are good.
Now I can't get enough of them. No. I'm a big my wife, who may show up tonight, fashionably late as always. She told me there's a little oyster bar down here in the South End, and maybe we can meander to after this.
I could do a dozen myself.
There you go. I mean, everybody in this room would agree that like Tableau is a powerful tool, right? But success with Tableau hinges on more than just the use of the tool itself. What do I mean by that? A couple of years ago, Tableau released a body of knowledge called Tableau Blueprint, which said, listen, yeah, to become a data-driven organization, sure, you need to invest in technology. There's no getting around that, but you also need to think about governance. You need to think about data literacy. You need to, create and nurture a data culture within your organization. You need to do a lot of things that sort of surround the tool, but don't necessarily have to do with the tool itself, right? And I fundamentally believe that. Like I saw it firsthand when I was at B of A and other places that I've worked, with during my time at Tableau. And what we're going to spend some time talking about today is the one thing that surrounds the use of the tool itself. So without further ado, usually when we do this, we're like standing up and there's a lot of energy, and now we're sitting down. So I'll try to bring the energy, and maybe I'll stand up from time to time. If I do, just like, you know,
We can stand up.
track me. Well, it's like I do this, but I'm like, what's going on with the notes here? So I'm gonna sit and we'll see where it goes. Our user group presentations tend to get a little weird and funky, but anyways, no, I mean, for the next 30 minutes or so, what we really want to talk about is a series of problems that all of us have been suffering from for a really long time, right? We're going to talk about the problem of missed errors in Tableau dashboards. We're going to talk about the problem of not having enough time to thoroughly test dashboards to catch those errors before they become risks and costly mistakes for your organization. And then we're also going to discuss the problem of the wild, wild west, right? All of us are using Tableau Cloud or Tableau Server, and we've experienced sort of the chaoticness of the organization of content, right? There's a bunch of things out there. How do you know of all of those data sources that are out there and all of those dashboards that are out there, which are accurate, which are reliable, and which are, you know, recent? This isn't just going to be a commiseration session, though I do think it's important to spend some time in that because it's vital for the healing process. We're also going to talk about solutions, right? Including how to automate Tableau and BI testing and streamline the analytics governance workflow. The spoiler alert is that it has everything to do with this emerging methodology called analytics ops, which is kind of like a sister to data ops, DevOps, AI ops, ML ops. There's so many different ops out there. We'll talk a little bit about what that means. Sound good? So to begin, let's just share a few thoughts on testing and stuff. So testing stuff, I mean, it's a part of who we are. As children, we learned about the world sort of around us by tipping a toe into the proverbial water. You wanted to know, is it hot? Is it cold? Should I, you know, dip my body into this? Yes or no? We tested stuff as children. As adults, we can't do the double click. You gotta help me with this click, and I'll do this click. Too many clicks. I've only got, you know, 2 hands, which should be sufficient, but it's not. Testing stuff. We do similar stuff as adults. I love wine tasting. I live in Washington, D.C., and there's a fantastic little wine store that's right by our house. We go there on a monthly basis and we test wine. You sort of, you know, put a little bit of wine into the glass or a lot of bit of wine into the glass, and you sort of lift it up to the light and you say semi-smart things like, wow, this thing has beautiful legs. And then you taste it and you're like, wow, it hints of elderberries and so on and so forth. What we're doing is we are tasting the wine. We're testing the wine to fundamentally see if we like it. And if we like it, wonderful. We go and we buy a bottle or 2 or a case. If you're super into wine. And if you didn't, well, test failed, you pass and you move on to the next one. As a people, this should sort of make us all sort of groan because of the pain that we lived through for the past couple of years. But as a people, testing has been a big part of our lives over the past couple of years, right? People, before going into buildings, attending conferences, and going to concerts and all this other stuff, had to take COVID tests. You had to do the awkward sort of Q-tip brain tickle thing. Nobody liked it, but you had to do it, and you were willing to do it because you wanted to keep each other safe, because you wanted to go into that conference venue in order to participate in the conference, right? And then let's talk about, you know, just life as professionals. Testing stuff is also a part of our professional life. As data and analytics professionals, we want to know with absolute certainty that our data sources that we're curating and publishing to Tableau Server, Tableau Cloud, and our dashboards are 100% accurate and completely reliable. Our stakeholders are using this stuff to make decisions. They expect nothing less because they're using these assets to, again, make decisions, to take action, to drive business value. The stakes are really, really, really high. And so I think we as BI professionals and data and analytics professionals hold ourselves and each other accountable for delivering perfection. But perfection is really hard to achieve.
Very hard, yes. So perfection is very hard because there's a lot of things that have to be tested for before we can really say something is perfect, right? First and foremost, we have to test for accuracy. And this means a couple different things. You might look at your dashboard and test the data that's displayed with the data that's on the back end. But you also have to test that same data when it's filtered based on different quick filters or parameters and how you've sliced and diced the data, if that still matches the data on the back end. Next, you have to test for your user experience, simulating the journey of your personas and if they're interacting with the dashboard as expected. Are these filters and parameters on your dashboard working the way you thought they would? Are they actually filtering the visits that they were supposed to? Are they actually, the actions are taking place the right way as they were supposed to? Security is essential for obvious reasons, but what about performance? If your dashboard is functioning correctly, and the data is correct, but it's taking 5 minutes, 10 minutes just to load, chances are your end users are not going to use it, right? Because it's taking too long. All of this will lead to problems there too. We also have stress testing. Stress testing is a good one for admins who want to ensure that their environments where the analytics are sitting has enough juice. This is something that has to be tested throughout time as there's more dashboards, more users added to the environment, just ensuring that this server environment is able to maintain that amount of concurrent users, or if they have to make decisions based on that. But we're not done yet. We also have regression testing, which happens either post deployment or with migrations, or when you move one piece of content from one area to another, and you want to ensure the status of that dashboard or workbook remain the same or not. So to say that testing has to happen all day, every day is not hyperbolic, because this is a production cadence that many of us follow. You're creating analytics and reports for stakeholders, and you're testing for accuracy and user experience, security, performance, stress testing, regression, everything. It has to happen all the time. We also test some of these in the context of strategic IT initiatives like database migration, cloud migration, if there's been database updates or upgrades, or if you want to test for your maintenance of analytics environments. As I mentioned before, we've all experienced disruption to some level because of all of these different reasons. You weren't supposed to lose access to that viz that you did, but somehow it happened, and it's probably because it didn't go through any testing.
Yeah, we'll ask everybody to share some examples if you're willing in a second, but let's just talk about the risks of not running all of those tests for all of those various scenarios. So, I mean, you just spoke to sort of an operational issue. Operationally, I think all of us have been in a situation where an upgrade occurred over the weekend or a database migration took place over the weekend. You came in on Monday, you were not supposed to have lost access to anything, but guess what? You did. You can't access your content, and that effectively causes an operational outage because you can't get access to the data that you need in order to make decisions. Financial and compliance risks. All you need to do is Google calculation errors in Excel, and you will land on countless amount of stories about how the smallest errors have led to really big losses, like hundreds of millions of dollars of losses for various organizations. Reputational. How many of you out there have pushed a dashboard to your boss or a stakeholder that mistakenly contained an error or two? You didn't catch it, they caught it, they come back to you, and they now want to know why this made it through to production. That reflects poorly on you and your reputation. And then, what about opportunity cost and trust? In 2021, Gartner reported that on average, organizations are spending about 10% of their revenue on data and analytics initiatives, which is a lot of money. When people are repeatedly exposed to and burned by all of these different risks, they act counter to what those investments were supposed to deliver. In other words, they go back to doing things the old way because they no longer trust the data products that are being put out, right? They once again rely on CSVs for data downloads. They once again, rely on CSVs for, not CSVs for data downloads, but for decision making. They once again rely on like shadow reporting because they don't trust anything else that people have put out. They go back to doing things the old way, and this further increases the risk exposure for the organizations across all of these different categories. you know, just to turn it into a question, because we want to keep this like semi-interactive, otherwise it's gonna be real boring. I mean, have people experienced like these risks personally? Anyone want to share a story? I used to QA Natalie's stuff, so she has stories that she probably doesn't want to share. Oh, no, they're the different. There's a student-teacher relationship here, and the teacher. Please, go ahead.
Share a thread of how pertinent it is, but
Yeah.
I think it's so valuable.
Please.
For a large data warehouse, we probably got about, it's account level, we got about 250 million accounts, and then we get 60 million customers, about 40 million households. Our process runs for 2 days, because we need to build households out of the accounts and a whole bunch of other items. And so, you know, I think one thing that was important, I found out now, is something, there's hundreds of jobs running, and obviously, we all know this thing can't run out of sequence.
Sure.
Like, if you're baking a cake, you
Yeah.
need to preheat the oven before the cake goes, you don't put the cake in first, and so something in a sequence, and so, our developer said, okay, we need to run this, this, and this. In a large data warehouse, there's hundreds of dependencies, and there's no way one person would know everything, you know, every dependency. And so we had huge issues where, it was this month, we're 3 days late. You know, we missed the SLA, and I think, I think my learning from this is, we don't run Tableau with a 200 million record table.
Right.
We insert summary counts into what we call a QC table.
Sure.
But one thing that was missing, we didn't have a load timestamp.
Yeah.
So when I went back to look at it, I'm like, wow, it looks good. Well, I was looking at the data from 3 days ago, not since we reran it,
Yeah.
and it looked good. And there's no way, because you don't know what you're looking at.
Yeah.
And and I think that's a great lesson. I just want to point out for everyone that
Yeah.
put the timestamp, know what data you're looking at.
Yeah.
And I think it made it more tricky for us because it's a monthly database. It's obviously if you get in daily or hourly, it's a whole different matter. But yeah, that was one huge learning. You have to know what data you're looking at, or it could be a disaster.
Yeah, I think it's a great example. We're going to talk a little bit about the need to not just get a little ahead of ourselves, but not just validate stuff as a part of the development process, but also to watch your production content, because a lot of crazy stuff is happening upstream of where that production content is living, right? Crazy stuff that could potentially lead to breakages on the front end, the Tableau dashboard, something goes kaput. Does anybody have like a reputational story that they want to share where you publish a dashboard to a stakeholder and they're like, hey, there's an error here?
I hate when you do this because it's kind of embarrassing. I had an analyst for me that did not check the revenue calculation, and our forecast for our revenue, which we published, were 20% off. And then we didn't figure that out until weeks later. It was not only embarrassing, it was actually pretty bad. 20%, that's a big number, yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, it was just because of failure to go through the process
Yeah.
of understanding how to calculate things and then validating it.
Even a couple of weeks ago, all of us are familiar with Superstore here. A couple of weeks ago, I was doing an internal training on Tableau, and as a part of like the Tableau, initial build out, you calculate the profit ratio. You take, one variable divided by the other variable, you get profit ratio. I've probably calculated, I built a calculation field for that like 10,000 times, and because it was moving so fast, I got it wrong, and I just kept going, and I didn't realize that it was wrong until we started visualizing the other information, and now suddenly I had a profit ratio that was 10,000%, which is really fantastic if it were true, but it wasn't, right? So these things happen. These things happen. So hopefully by now, you appreciate the point that validation is really, really, really important, but it is insufficient in and of itself. So Tableau Blueprint, I talked about that previously. How many people are familiar or not familiar with Blueprint? Fantastic. body of work, I am heavily biased because I used to lead content development and go-to-market strategy for Tableau Blueprint. But fundamentally, it provides a roadmap for organizations to expand and optimize their use of data. It is filled to the brim with really fantastic processes and best practices related to stuff like strategy work, data literacy, governance, and so much more. The section, on content governance specifically addresses like some of the problems that we're talking about here, right? Blueprint states that validation is really important, but it needs to be followed by promotion as well as certification. So promotion refers to basically the task that you take on to move this fully validated content to another location, like a production project if you're on Tableau Cloud, or a production site if you are deployed on-prem with Tableau server. The reason that you are doing this is because you want to keep this like in progress, in development stuff separate from that fully validated, ready to go for decision-making stuff, right? You don't want stakeholders to take this in progress stuff and think it's good to go and make a decision based on it. You want to keep those things totally separate. Certification is the next step. It refers to basically the boxes that you are checking, so that way your stakeholders know of all of that content that is living in this production project or production site, which is not only accurate content, but also recent and therefore reliable for decision making. I always say that BI content is kind of like bread. It goes stale, right? Circumstances change, questions change, requirements change, and without certification, it is very difficult to know of all of that production content, which content is still good to go.
So here's what happens. Before you develop a dashboard, there's a lot of requirements that you have to gather. And during your validation, you're testing that all of those requirements that you gathered have been met. Once you promote the content to your production project, you can ultimately certify it and get it out into the hands of the stakeholders. Simple, right? Well, yes, but unfortunately, time is precious, especially for analysts who are inundated with requests for help. They're just getting more and more work for dashboard development, and there aren't enough hours in the day to keep up with the backlog of the analytics and reports that need to get in the hands of the stakeholders. So people skip steps, and coming from the analyst point of view in that world of developing dashboards, I've been there. I've been exactly in that position where I did do it, yeah. And I'm opening up here because it feels like a safe space. So
when you say, is it the dashboard or the data being stale? What are we talking about?
We're talking about the dashboard. We're talking about the analytics layer. And that's the really important piece, right? And we've got a great slide next that we'll talk a little bit about this, but we're really talking about the dashboard. You collected all these requirements from your stakeholder. Maybe it's for the purpose of a report, for self-service analytics, a bunch of filters and stuff. Maybe it's an analysis. Somebody gave you a question and you're trying to help them answer that question. You collected all those requirements, then you build the thing, the product, the dashboard to deliver against those requirements. Then you validate it, you make sure it's accurate and blah, 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 blah. You move it to prod, you revalidate it because maybe something changed, and ultimately you release it and you're like, here's your thing, it's good to go, right? But people are really busy. Like that process is a bit of a pipe dream. Nobody has time to fully run that process because you're busy, right?
I'll give you an example. We were talking to a client today, and they have a pretty robust, although it's a manual process for rechecking their dashboards. And they had a dashboard in production, and they said, yeah, we stumbled across this calculation that just didn't make sense because it ended with a 1, and they have a format for how they do calculations. You know, like it's in prod. Like, we don't know how this happened, right? And so because they stumbled across it, they got lucky. But there was no process to continue to sort of test that content, right? And so they got lucky this time. Another example is where your data source breaks or it isn't updated. So if nobody's checking that in a meaningful way on a regular basis, it's going to fail. So it could be the data isn't updating. It could be that the data is wrong to his example over there. And it could be that something happened post-prod that was unexpected and therefore you didn't catch it.
Yeah, and
Because there could be three things here, right? Whether it is a column level summary that is going on, or it is a
Yeah.
row level formula, or it is a lookup kind of a formula.
And it
So
could
that's
even
how
be
I'm thinking.
bigger than that, right? That's ultimately what this slide speaks to. You can't just run validations as a part of like your initial development process, I would say. You also need to
You gotta
monitor
do it.
content. It's important, right? But it's insufficient in and of itself. Once that content has been released and now is in the hands of your stakeholder, you still gotta watch it. Because things could go bump, right? At the storage layer, column names change. That shouldn't happen, but they do. Data types change. That shouldn't happen, but it does. Processing errors happen in ETL processes. Alteryx fails out from time to time, or Pratt fails out from time to time. Extract
Don't have the
refreshes don't fail, right? They don't have the date. The bottom line is like there's all of these things that happen in advance of the consumption layer that could ultimately cause a biz to become stale or break altogether, leading to operational outages or, again, stale information that people don't think is stale, and so they act on it only later to realize like they were operating information. I think everybody, I'm gonna go back just a quick slide. I think everybody is doing validation to some extent today. Like when we were on the HR reporting and analytics team at Bank of America, I was responsible for DEI analytics. Natalie was responsible for talent acquisition analytics. Like we had others who were responsible for other areas. We had, I would say like an informal peer review process in place. Natalie would send me her stuff, I'd look at it. I didn't know her business. And so really I'm looking at the visuals, I'm doing some spot checks. Do I see some weird stuff? And I would say, yep, everything looks good. Probably good to, go for, probably good to go, moving to production.
Do you do that just as well as when you're hungover as not?
Yeah, exactly.
Or you're tired because you're out late, your kid was up
Exactly.
last night, so there's all these other things also.
All of these other things, there's all of these other things. So I think we're all doing something to some extent, but certainly not tackling the complexity that is just baked within each of these workbooks. And if we're not tackling the complexity that's based in these workbooks during initial development, then we certainly don't have time to monitor this stuff to the point of the next slide on an ongoing nature once it lives in production. Like it's a simple math game. If you are building, let's say 4 workbooks a week, 4 dashboards a week, at the end of 5 weeks, now you have 20 pieces of content that live out on Tableau server that you want to keep an eye on because people are using it to make decisions. And like we said, something could have caused that to break and you want to find it before your stakeholder finds it. Now you've got to keep an eye on 20 pieces of thing, plus build 4 more new things. It's a game that just becomes very difficult to keep up with, right? And that's what this whole section gets to. What are we to do, right? Are we just to accept sort of all of these risks to be this, untouchable, unavoidable thing? Like, absolutely not. Here at Wiiisdom, we have seen just countless organizations eliminate the risk exposure that I talked about previously by testing, promoting, and certifying BI content at scale. And the at scale part is really, really, really important. So just to, show you a couple of things, and then we'll get to a bit of a demo on Wiiisdom just to help make it a bit more real. Let's look at the data value. So to produce business value, data needs to go through a lot of different steps, right? It needs to move from collection, through storage and processing and analysis to get to the point of action. On paper, this all looks really, really simple. Move your data from A to B to C, bing, bing, boom. It's all, nice and done. We all know everything is not that simple. Each step in this process is an aggregate of many, many, many little steps. And without governance, these little steps lead to really big problems for the organization, right? That's why stuff like data ops exists. Data ops, I think many of us are familiar with this, but data ops aims to improve data reliability and integrity by orchestrating and automating data integration and processing pipelines, right? Data engineers love data ops because it adds governance and rigor to an otherwise very chaotic process. But do you ever notice that when people talk about data ops, it almost seems to be like this thing that ends with the materialized view in Snowflake or like a gold layer if you're super on to Databricks, it seems to be a thing that fundamentally comes to an end before anything analytics begins. That, for me, has always felt a bit insufficient, especially when you just think about all of the stuff that's happening at that consumption layer. Data might need to go through a bit more transformation to suit the needs of the business. People grade calculations in Tableau, and the list kind of goes on and on and on. That ultimately is where this idea of analytics ops fits in. So analytics ops is an emerging methodology that applies principles from all of these different ops that are out there to the cycle of analysis with a focus on automation. Analytics ops exists to build trust in data and analytics and increase confidence in data-driven decision-making by streamlining everything that we've been talking about, the development, the testing, the deployment, the push to prod stuff, and those monitoring processes for analytics and dashboards and reports. I would think of this as sort of the final mile of data ops, taking all of that CI/CD stuff just a little bit further to the benefit of all of the things that are happening in your analytics layer.
Does everybody know what CI/CD stands for?
Continuous integration.
There you go. Cool. So I could go on for hours and hours about this, but it's a little warm in this room, so we don't want to do that. I also don't think it's the best way to learn. So we'll do a little demo for you, but before we do, I'll just set up the story. So I want you to meet Ace here. Ace is like many of us. He's a Tableau creator, right? He's loved by everybody in the organization because he's ultimately known for producing analytics and report that are, very beautiful and just like very, very reliable. Ace's validation workflow, it looks very similar to our own. He builds stuff, he passes it along to a peer to spot check for errors. From there, he takes that dashboard to a data steward who publishes it to a production project, right? One day, Ace gets a note from his boss. The organization is doing some restructuring, which means like people are gone, right? And from now on, Ace is pretty much on his own. He needs to manage this workflow by himself. He can't rely on his peers. His peers are either gone or they're too busy doing other stuff now. Ace has been, we've all been there. Ace is frustrated. More work is never a good thing. So he gets this message from his manager and he starts replying like with this angry message, like blah, 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 blah. And then he deletes it. And then he like rewrites an angry message and he deletes it. And so instead he decides to just like give a thumbs up, passive aggressive emoji, which is kind of like the corporate approved way of a middle finger emoji, I think. But he's frustrated, right? He has to do more work. He never wants to do, nobody wants to do more work. He's already got too much to do. He's frustrated, but it is what it is. Obviously, this goes fine for a little while. Ace is, super experienced, super experienced, and super capable in this area. But eventually, like the story continues, right? The workload just becomes too much. He does what I said previously. Ace starts to skip steps because he has a lot to deliver. There's just not enough hours in the day to do thorough testing and more. He also doesn't have time to keep an eye on everything that's in production. Again, it's a simple math game. And so as you can imagine, and I'm sure you have all received messages like this, things start to go wrong. Ace's stakeholders start to, message him about like broken data sources and mismatched numbers. And this doesn't just happen once, it happens again and again and again and again. Ace notices that his adoption rates begin to fall. People aren't using his stuff anymore because they can't trust it. They're actively turning away from his BI content. And so one day it all comes to a head. Ace's boss asks him to come into the office and sort of shares the story that I said previously. Hey, you gave me a report, thought it was great, I brought it to my boss. They pointed out an error. Now I look stupid. And because I look stupid, now I'm angry at you. It's frustrating, right? I think some of us have been there. Ace is fed up, he needs to find a better way, and so ultimately he turns to his old friend Google, searches for a string of words that has something to do with this problem, Tableau, testing, analytics, governance, operations, blah, 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 and fundamentally he lands on a page for Wiiisdom. Wiiisdom fundamentally automates BI testing and streamlines your analytics governance workflow, including all of that stuff that I talked about previously. It does testing, and we'll show you what that looks like in just a second. And then after testing is complete, it'll auto-promote it to a production project or site or whatever, and then certify it in the event that it's a data source. We've got certification abilities coming for for dashboards as well, which we're very excited about. Watermarking has been a feature that every Tableau user has asked for many, many years, and Tableau just hasn't delivered. Rather than me talk through like how Wiiisdom is no code and all these other things, why don't we just show it to you, and then we'll conclude it and go with some tips and tricks.
Do you guys have spell check in the product?
So we don't have spell check. You know, it's funny.
This was the name when they made it through, huh?
Yeah. This comes up again and again and again, and through APIs, I think it's technically possible, but somebody said something the other day that makes me wonder if it's even worth building that anymore. Grammarly does spell check in desktop. So Grammarly is free for anybody to use, whether it's approved for use on your corporate laptop. It's another matter. But Grammarly is free to use, and it works with calculated fields, it works with text boxes, it works sort of across the board in Tableau. And so Grammarly isn't just for like grammar stuff, it's also for spell check purposes. So that got me thinking, like, do we actually need spell check in Tableau anymore? I don't think so. As long as you got something. I'm spelling dumb. I can't spell anything. I still struggle with the word business. There's too many S's, U's, and I's. I can't do it. Enough about myself. Exactly. I always forget where the Z is in business. That was a bad joke. Okay, let's show you guys Wiiisdom.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Jeremy, for walking us through that and setting the tone. First and foremost, I just want to kind of give you an idea what we're going to be looking at. So how testing is usually done is, like we talked about it, we open up a visualization, we look at the filters, we run through them, maybe click a couple of values in the filter, look and make sure the charts are actually changing the way they're supposed to, change some parameters, again, see what happens. And maybe we keep doing this with every iteration of it, or maybe we do this every week, every month, post deployment. There's a lot of different times that you might want to run it, right? So in the very first test that I want to show you here, and you can see a series of tests that I've had on my left side, I want you to take a look at this side. And what we have is a number of different tasks. So I have open viz, I have set filter, and I can see that I have 3 of them. But the very first one is open viz. And what it does is it opens up a visualization on my Tableau side, and I can choose which visualization by clicking the search button. And right now what's happening is Ops is essentially connecting to the Tableau cloud that I've put the connections for. You can do this with your on-prem and any sort of Tableau environment. You're seeing the projects that I have available for my user based on my governance, based on my permissions. And through the projects, I can navigate down to the workbook levels and ultimately down to the dashboard that I really want to test. And I can click on that dashboard name and I can see a screenshot of that dashboard come up. This is great for me because I don't have to swap screens. I don't have to go between 2 screens. I can immediately see what's going on, which dashboard is there. In any case, I know this is the dashboard, and my next test, in my next task, I am setting a filter value to for my segments. If you're familiar with Tableau and if you've seen the Superstore data, this is probably a little bit familiar to you all. So for a filter that I have based on segment, I want to select these 2 values, consumer and corporate. So I'm asking Ops to go in and just select those 2 values. I'm doing a very similar thing for my filter for the category. I'm asking furniture and office supplies. And I'm essentially duplicating all of this manual work that I've had to do as a QA analyst. Here, replicating the same user experience, creating all those steps, and even asking Ops to go in and select the mark on my visualization, whether it's scatter plot or a bar chart or a line chart, whatever mark you might have on your chart, you can select it. And I'm asking it to also switch the tab just so I ensure this is operating as expected. Now that I'm happy with my test, I'm going to run it. And I click run. At this state, I just kind of step back. Yeah,
hands up.
Hands up. Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
I can just
We don't
hang out,
he does.
talk about, yeah. So now Ops is essentially opening up that dashboard on Tableau Cloud. You can see those segments are selected, that category is selected, the mark is selected, tab is switched, and ultimately I get a result that the test ran successfully.
Can I just say, like, I used to do this manually when I was at the bank. Like I said, I did
Yeah.
B&I reporting where I had a series of filters that would allow like LOB leaders and sub-LOB leaders and others to filter to their slice of the story. And I wanted to make sure that they actually saw data once they filtered to their view, because I knew if they didn't, then something was wrong, right? And so what I would do is navigate the very painful work of clicking a filter, and seeing if there was data. And then I'd click the other filter and see if there was data, and I would go through all those permutations, consuming just an endless amount of time out of my day to just validate that the user experience was good to go, was
As
positive,
expected,
right?
yeah.
The robot did everything for you here.
Exactly, and you know, one of the simplest tests that I had to do, making sure the dashboard is published with a set of filters that were pre-defined, right? And sometimes you miss those, and you can define all of those values here. So when it runs, you're happy. It's kind of giving you the results. But one thing, oh yes, please.
Just curious about the order of operation, like the context filter, how would that factor in here?
Context filter.
Yeah.
So the context filter essentially, what we're testing for here is really the values of the operation, right? So the context filter, what it has done on the Tableau side, it's showing you a result of the data, right? So what we're testing here for is now we're saying, does that result fall within a certain range that I've defined for?
Okay.
Is my sales above this value? Are my dimensional values that I'm seeing displayed the set of values that are expected? So it's not so much going and looking at those filter values, but it's giving you what the results looks like on the front end.
Where I do see an interesting use case with the use of context filters is on, I'm blanking on the name, data test, not a sort of SQL, but a sort of data rule service. And here's why. So let's say you accidentally define a filter as a context filter, which basically puts a big box around the data that is now present in this view. You didn't mean for that to happen. And so the number, instead of, including everything around the box, now only includes the number, that was materialized because you wrote the box surrounding it. So you set up and we'll show you this here in a second, but you set up a data rule saying, I'm expecting this value, or I need this value to match this value for my underlying data source. And when those numbers don't match, you're like, why is that? Then you go back and you're like, oh, it's because I accidentally made this context filter when it shouldn't have been a context filter, right? It should just be a regular.
Yeah.
So we don't necessarily, I hate to say it, but like we don't really care about like the order of operations within Tableau, but we can help you test to make sure that you implemented the order of operations.
Right, or at least find that there is some inconsistency in your data to be able to really navigate closely to what that might be. So we're really catching for those types of issues here. But one thing you did mention in terms of order of operations, just to quickly say that the tasks that you see here are running in a sequential order. So the order of operations that you mentioned just triggered for me to remember. Just to mention this, you can also swap out spots here, and you can really customize it based on what you like. But more importantly, one thing to keep in mind here is that it's great that we've defined this rule and this test, and we can come here and run it manually by clicking this run test. But you can also automate this entire process, which is something that Jeremy brought a lot of emphasis on, which is by scheduling this test using your Windows Task Scheduler or your cron on Linux or your CI/CD process, whatever process that may be, as long as you can plug in the batch script into that CI/CD process in a way that makes sense, you can have this test run automatically at times that make sense, whether it's right after the databases are refreshed with the data, whether it's first thing in the morning before folks come in. And once the test runs in whatever fashion, you can also integrate it with your email, Slack, or webhooks to really be notified if this test ran, whether it was successful or failure, and ultimately get some additional detail into that success and failure also. So when you come in first thing in the morning, you already have some ideas about the tests that have ran, and if they ran successfully or if they failed. One last thing to mention about tests, with every test, you also get a report. And you get an archive of all the reports that you've had. And I think this was brought up in terms of some performance indications. The very first things that we see in our report is the tasks that ran, the status of them, whether they were successful, if they were partial success, or if they failed. But from an analyst point of view, I really like this portion because it's immediately giving me some timestamps, and I can immediately kind of get a sense which areas of my dashboard might need some attention.
First one's longer because you had to log on to server.
Exactly, yes.
Your dashboard could be 100% accurate. It can be totally functional.
Yeah.
But if it takes 5 minutes to load, 10 minutes to load, nobody's going to stick around to find out.
Right.
That's right, yeah. And this is a great example of checking for all the functionality of your dashboard, making sure your filters are actually operational the way they're supposed to, the parameters are working, the interactions are happening. But again, I've done enough QA to know that we always test for the data as well, whether that data that we are looking at is accurate or at least falls within a certain range of accuracy. And so for that, we have the assert data rule, which is among most of these other tasks that we have, right? We have set the date range, or asserting for parameter values, or for SQL to connect to your backend. Any sort of native functionality that you have on Tableau, you can really test for it. But when it comes to checking for data, you can specify a test here, and it goes and looks at, for example, in this case, I'm asking ops to go and ensure my values for my date are greater than 2017. For an example that we were just talking about right now, if we had a test that it's looking at the date that is always greater than today or greater or equal to today, it would be the first layer of kind of proof, so that at all times we know that this data is fresh from today or not, right? Be able to have some of these kind of triggers for yourself to be able to always be on top of that side of the report. And we can do this using the operators that we're familiar with, equal, greater than, so forth, or in regular expression, which in this task, we're looking at the values for a dimensional value. So for my region, I'm testing if these 3 values fall within the range of what's being displayed on my visualization. So I'm looking for central, east, south. Lastly, we can also set rules based on the formula. So if you're familiar or comfortable with writing formulas, we have all the functions that are universal and you're probably familiar with. So most of this is very straightforward. And if it's not for you, you can click on it and get the syntax. Very familiar ways that we've been familiar with. Now with this one, the report failed. And it's a great way to see how we can troubleshoot the failure. And if I show it to you in this full screen, I can see that there was some partial success on my region and some failure on my sales data. So if I click on the region, it's showing that of the 3 values that I have in my expression, there's actually a west value that is coming and displayed on my visualization. So it's the first layer for me to know whether or not this value is supposed to be on my visualization. Maybe west should not be on the dashboard. And now I can know who to reach out to. Maybe the data steward or the developers who developed this dashboard. Or maybe west was in fact supposed to be here and I just missed it in my expression. Whatever the case may be, I'm getting some insight into what is the discrepancy here. Yes?
I was just wondering if it's possible to run these tests in like the background, like headless, or does it have to-
Definitely, yeah.
That was the whole hands up thing. We're dancing like we're not doing anything. Yeah, I don't think that came across with my dance. I mean, that's the thing is, so you fire, once you click run test, it's headless, right? Or pretty much.
You're not operating the mouse and stuff, but like it still pops up.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, you can also not have that. And we do it for like demo purposes because it's fun and exciting, but it's very annoying when I do that personally because I like run test over here and then I try to work over here and then it like hijacks my mouse every minute and I'm like, oh my gosh, leave me alone thing. So.
And especially depending on the complexity of your test and if there's repetitive processes, maybe you have a number of tasks that are in that test, you don't want it to be popping right as you're doing work. So yes, in our configuration option, we have the headless mode, which we enable fairly simply and have none, which I think is what you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, which it's not like it takes your mouse, but a window pops up and then your mouse goes over there and clicks off the main window and it gets highly annoying. When you like, it's fun with demo purposes for it to pop up. annoying. Should we show?
So I showed a lot of functional tests. I just want to see if anyone had any thoughts or
Let's
did
shoot
this.
assert sequel, maybe
Okay.
just the regression, but can
Okay.
zip off to some tips and tricks.
Cool. Yeah, so for the assert with the SQL here, what I want to show you is this is an important test from, again, an analyst point of view where you're comparing the data on your Tableau side and comparing it against a backend database, right? So my SQL database, my Postgres database, I want to make sure the values that are defined on that data warehouse are matching my published data source or if there is any discrepancies. So with the search SQL, what I can do is establish that connection, like you can see here, using a JDBC URL, my username and password, and ultimately writing a query. And now this query is being compared directly against what is on my Tableau side. And if there are discrepancies, it'll identify them for me. Okay, so now really quickly, want to just jump into another test that we have here, which is the regression test. We briefly talked about it in the presentation. The regression test is essentially looking at your dashboard in two different areas, in two different states, whether it's published from UAT to production or whether it's from migration. You just want to make sure nothing broke in the process, everything is running as expected. So in my cross-environmental test that I have here, I can define a source and a target and specify if my source is sitting on my completely standalone server somewhere else with a different URL, or my target is a completely different URL of its own, or they're both in the same URL but different projects. And once I've created that definition for them, I can run the test against several different properties, and they are things like image by image search, or the data check, or if the filters exist, everything that, again, I would do probably with two monitors, one by one next to each other. In my report, I can see exactly what that looks like so. So it's giving me a quick idea that there's been some discrepancies, quite a lot
There's
of
a lot of discrepancies. There's a lot of red
So
tape.
this could be just like a filter not there.
So you notice it immediately because I'm sure you've done some QA in your life, and yes, exactly. So there's some filters that are missing here, and that's how I used to do QA also. I would always check for the filters because if they're missing, everything's all over the place. So as you see, the visual gives you some indications, but also here we can see that the parameters are giving me some detail about what the data might look like on the summary level, what the filters might look like. And in this case, it's telling me on my left side, there are two of three values, whereas on my left side, on right side, there's one more additional value that's not selected. Okay, so that was a very quick run through regression.
Yeah.
Do you feel good about it?
Yeah.
Anything else we should cover, or?
No, I mean, if you just go back to the slide real quick, I'll sum it up. Where we see a lot of use of regression testing is during the push to promotion process, as well as for strategic IT initiatives, right? So push to promotion, you've done thorough testing for content in your pre-prod environment. You don't want to run that through testing. Once it's in production, you do a quick regression test to see if anything's different. Or let's say you've got a strategic IT initiative, like a database migration or an upgrade or whatever. You want to make sure that everything is the same before and after that event occurs. You run regression testing against all of your content, all at once. But I guess just to sum it up, so on the left-hand side, Wiiisdom Ops for Tableau connects to Tableau Cloud, Tableau Server, doesn't matter the version that it's on, as well as your data source, whether that is on-prem or up in the cloud if you're using Snowflake or something like that. Run a bunch of tests for a bunch of different scenarios. Test for accuracy, user experience, security, performance, and so on and so forth for ongoing analytics and reporting needs, but also these strategic IT initiatives like database migrations and stuff. On the back end of those tests, we automate the push to production through promotion, as well as the certification of data sources, test results available as flat files, but also available as data points in Postgres. You can take all of that data, push it to Postgres, and then visualize the results of it on a Tableau dashboard for long-term trend analysis and auditing purposes, which is important financial services organizations. And then finally, in the event that you have scheduled and are automating tests, if something goes bump, we provide you with notifications of that bump and successes for that matter through Slack and Teams and all these other things. And then finally, in the event that you have implemented data ops, DevOps within your organization, you're using Git and different things to do versioning, we'll snap into all of that as well. So yeah, that's just a little bit about Wiiisdom. What I always say at the conclusion of these presentations is, listen, like what we're talking about is really, really, really important. Like your people are using your content to make decisions for the organization, decisions that ultimately should generate significant business value. You can't afford to not thoroughly, test your BI content. So if nothing else, develop a process around that. Even if manually initially, validate your BI content, then take it and move it to another place so people can separate out the in-process stuff from the fully validated stuff. And then figure out some certification mechanism, come up with a checklist, whatever. Even if you need to start manually, start there. And then when you need to figure out how to scale because you just can't keep up with the volume of work, then give us a call. And we are more than happy to talk to you about how Wiiisdom can automate everything related to all of that. Where we have had a lot of success thus far is in the highly regulated verticals. Regulatory reporting is super important in financial services, pharma, public sector, and more. Wiiisdom Ops for Tableau, as well as Wiiisdom Ops for SAP Business Objects, and soon Wiiisdom Ops for Power BI is used quite heavily in those verticals. So we're already a customer of some of the organizations that are based in this area. So anyways, long story short, do it manually. And then when it becomes a problem, give us a call. And if you're a customer already, great, you can use it, nice and simple. And if not, then we'll introduce you to people who would be happy to have a commercial conversation with you. But anyways, that's what we have. Questions? Any more questions for us? We appreciate the engagement. It's a little warm in this room. Maybe it's just because I wore a jacket.
Yeah, that probably is.
I like jackets.
Yeah, any questions for Jeremy while we transition?
Yeah, anything on like row level security?
Yeah, we like gloss over that just because there's so many different security approaches out there, but you want to talk about it?
Definitely. So the assert SQL that we took a brief look on, if you have your security tables on the back end available, we can essentially check for that. Write a query, define a user, see what type of data comes as a result, and compare it against what's being displayed on the Tableau side, right?
Again, there's just so many different ways to manage security, with data and analytics things that we gloss over. But I mean, just going back to my process when I was doing D&I stuff at B of A, I would mimic my stakeholders, the LOB leader and their directs to see if they could see things that they should see, or if they, or vice versa, if they could see things that they shouldn't see. It was
Sorry, Becky, thank you for the point that you can actually hear me. My bad. Starting the video back too. My bad. Cool. All right. So gonna pitch to Rashid. If you've got questions, throw them in the chat. Rashid's gonna do a little bit of a presentation on some tips and tricks. If you've got questions, throw them in the chat. We'll do our best to address. We'll probably go for another 15 minutes. Folks in the room, feel free if you need to take off, grab more food. Please God, eat it all. I don't have anywhere to take it. All right, Rashid, all you, bud.
Are you good?
By the way, it's not right if I record these quick tips that via my phone.
This is recording already, so
Oh, it
yes,
is?
feel
No.
free. We're gonna post this.
For $9.95. All right, for those who don't know, hopefully we're back on audio for the virtual folks here. This is gonna be, like I said in the room, we're not doing another 60 minutes. This is gonna be 15 minutes of however many tips I can get in there as fast as we can. There's always a variety of skill levels, so I'm gonna jump. We're gonna go to stuff that's super easy. You started using Tableau yesterday, to stuff that, and then these guys can attest to it. They're not in the instruction manual. I don't know why. You'll never find how to do this anywhere else. You have to ask somebody. It's like, that works? And no one ever, yes, because there's stuff like that in Tableau, where unless someone told you, you would never figure it out on your own. So hopefully, at least one or two of these might be new to you. But like I said, after a time, we're gonna just jump around. I'm Rashid M. I am senior lead analyst consultant, something at Wells Fargo. But like these guys, I spent time in Tableau. It feels like prison sentences. Like, I do. And someone did 6 years. The good news is we've all got our badge of honor, and we can all kind of now help you guys with everything. All right, so I'm gonna go rapid fire. If you need me to slow down, I'll slow down, because that stuff at conference, they go super fast. I'm not going that fast, but it's gonna be close. All right. First tip right out the bat, for those who don't know, simple thing, this is for everybody. Everything in Tableau can be rearranged as far as these cards are concerned. Most of you probably know you can move certain things around, but I don't know if you knew you can move everything around. If you see this kind of icon, when you hover over the top left section or something, you can move it. Like right now, I just move captions over there. I can move it over there. I can move it at the bottom, something you might have already known. But again, that goes for everything. I can move the marks card over to the right. I can move pages shelf down there. I can move filters down there. I can move columns and rows. I don't know why you want to do this, but you can. Everything can be moved to wherever the hell you want to move it on the screen, as long as it's got that in the top left corner, where I forget what that's called. But as long as you hover over the top left, you can just kind of rearrange the screen however you want. Okay, real quick, for those who don't know, there is a difference when you right click and drag. I don't know the Mac shortcuts. I think it's like Option click. But for those who are on Windows, when you right click and drag a field into rows or columns, you're going to get kind of like a prompt. And it does change depending on what kind of field you're dragging over. If you drag a measure over to, columns or rows, and I'm saying right click drag, so I'm just holding down the right mouse button, I'm just dragging, you're going to see you get this kind of a menu. It's going to be things all related to a measure. It's a quick way of saying, instead of putting the measure there and then changing it from sum to average or whatever, you can just pick real quick what you want it to be. That's one variation. Another one's going to be on the date field. If you right click and drag a date, you get another variation of this is what you would get had you right clicked on the date when it was over there. Just a quicker way of seeing it that way. And obviously the last one's going to be just a discrete dimension. It's got its own kind of context menu when you right click and drag. There's something to be, I think that was another measure. Sorry about that, but you get the idea. Okay, mouse functions, there's not enough time to go through these, and that's way too small to read. If you get a chance, do a Google search. There's a lot of stuff you can do with mouse functions if you care in Tableau. I'm not gonna sit there and say there's anything super exciting, but there's a few things you can do, and it changes depending on what kind of visual it is, like with a map or kind of like with a scatter plot. Stuff you can do with like long clicks, right clicks, things of that nature. Duplicating the field, for those who don't know, again, I don't know the Mac variation of this, but if you hold down the control key and just drag a field, like kind of, again, it'll just automatically duplicate it. So if you wanted to take a field and put it on like, I don't know, the row shelf and put it on color or something like that, just hold down the control key. It's a quick way. If you ever got to use the same field again, you don't have to kind of pull it out from the data pane once more. Okay. Assign a hero to a field. This is something I hope everybody knows, because this is kind of something that does come in handy every now and again. We got a map, as you can see, it's the profit ratio. Basically, right now we can see that it's broken out by state. This is a scenario like if you didn't have region kind of, or I should say you did have region, but you kind of wanted to show region on the map. Region by definition might not be a geographic field in your data set. And this goes to, region is just the example. This could be a custom territory, it could be a lot of things. But basically what I'm saying is that I've got this field over here, and you can see, I mean, I wish I could zoom in, by the ABC icon in front of region, that is just the text field. Tableau doesn't know, Tableau's looking at that field like it's the text field like any other text field. It does not know the actual geographic boundaries of region right now. But you can create a way for it to know that, by basically creating a geographic hierarchy. And the way you do that is basically we're just gonna right click on region, and this could be any field. Like I said, it could be a custom territory if you wanted. And then I'm gonna go to geographic role, and I'm gonna say create from. Now the options in create from are basically gonna be whatever fields I have in my data set that do have geographic roles. So if it found city, state, and zip code, saying I know what those are, do you want me to kind of use one of those to build your region thing? And the answer for that is yes, I want to build it around state. So by doing so, it just created a hierarchy over here. It basically took region and kind of made it apparent to state. And what that does, now I can take state off, I don't want to take off detail. I'm just going to take the hierarchy and put it right on top of where state was. And now I've got the ability to look at it from a regional perspective, but I can also still look at it from the state perspective as well. Quick way of doing this. Again, region is just more of a, that's the field I had. It could be anything. You could be, like I said, you could build your own custom territories and have a quick way of doing that kind of aggregation. The thing that it's doing, it's just saying, what geographic field do you want me to be? Do you want to be the child of whatever territory you're creating? And that's kind of just basically how it works. If you have questions, obviously stop me. Like I said, I'm going to jump around. Some of these things are not all that exciting, and others are going to take too long to explain. I'm going to skip that one. That one's not all that special. This one is not even a damn tip. If you ever want to get rid of this, literally just right click on it and say hide indicator. Like I didn't know some people didn't know that, but some people did. Okay, no axis bar chart. For best practice visual design best practice reasons, you shouldn't probably do this, but I'm sure there's a use case. And I'd rather how, and then like I said, it's up to you if you ever want to do it. I intentionally made the zero line red so you can see that this bar chart has a zero line. It's very easy to build a bar chart without a zero line. And if you ever want to do it, just take whatever you have. Like right now, I've got product subcategory and the sum of the 2014 sales. Instead of having some of 2014 sales on columns, I'm literally just going to move it to size. Now that's going to look strange, but that's fine because what I'm going to do is change the mark type to bar. And now I've got a bar chart that has no zero line. Again, for visual design best practice reasons, that zero line sometimes is useful. I mean, it could get a little, depending on people's vision and stuff like that, you don't want to make it more difficult to read, but if you only had like 4 things, 4 bars, you see what I'm saying? Like there's probably a legitimate use case. But quick way to create a bar chart without an axis if you ever wanted to know. All right, let's get some good tips, the stuff that they don't tell you, stuff that's not in the instructions. Okay, how to swap measures on a color marks card without altering the original color palette. I'm gonna try to just do 5 or 6 more of these and then wrap it up. All right, this is good because I don't know if most people know this, the way this works with Tableau. Right now, I've got a map and it's just basically the sum of sales kind of broken out across state. I'm gonna change it from being the sum of sales to something like profit ratio. It's gonna drag profit ratio over color and just drop it. Now, you'll notice what happened, the entire color palette changed, and that's a default Tableau behavior. You change a measure, take another measure and change whatever measure you had, and if it was on color, the color palette, I think, will go back to this default, whatever the default color palette is for whatever Tableau is trying to accomplish. What if I didn't want that to happen? What if I want to use profit ratio and keep this color palette? There's a way to do this, and the way to do it is just to do an inline edit. Instead of taking profit ratio and dropping it on top of sum of sales, just double click on sum of sales. Literally, as it exists in the inline edit, just erase whatever's there, and I'm just going to change it to profit ratio, and hopefully this works. It does. Now, profit ratio, Montana, you can see, is clearly the lowest, but we kept the same color palette. This isn't just for maps, and this isn't just for color. Inline edits will keep formatting. It'll keep all sorts of other stuff. Anything on that marks card, it'll keep. So if you went through a whole holy hell to build this sheet the way you wanted it to, and someone wants you to change a measure or something at the last minute, do an inline edit, you'll be able to kind of maintain all that stuff that you did without it going back to whatever the default font, default, color, default, whatever, kind of thing that Tableau normally wants to do. Unclickable. This is not a tip. This is just more of a, if you didn't know, this is what most of us do. At the end of the day, there's a million scenarios where you might have a situation where you want to make something where they can't actually click on it. Like right now, everything is clickable. This is, again, it's not a tip. It's just what most of us do. Just take a blank box and put it on top of it. Like, this is something that I can't stress to you. Like, most of us who build dashboards for a living just do this. Now I can't click anywhere. And it's just something that all of us have done at some point in time. Float a blank box right on top of it. Now it's unclickable. Probably more effective ways to do it, but this is the quickest and easiest.
It's great to do those big header. It's great to do those big header numbers that don't drive any interaction, right? So when somebody clicks them and they get highlighted, you start looking around like, what did I change?
Oh, well,
What happened?
perfect segue.
What happened?
Let's talk about some default Tableau behaviors that we all hate.
There you go.
We've got some bands, big ass numbers, big aggressive numbers. It's late and I'm moving forward. Now, bands using text versus bands using transparent shape. To Jeremy's point, these are bands using text. Why would I just not keep using, what's wrong with bands using text? Why the hell you tell me about transparent shapes? Because when someone hovers over them and clicks one of them, Tableau does this. Now, this might be fine, this might not be fine. You have no control over that blue color. You have no control over this behavior. To Jeremy's point, most people float the damn blank box in front of it to stop this from happening. But there's another way. And the other way is transparent shapes. Now, I got some links. Go to Google, look for, you can just say Tableau transparent shapes. There's people who talked about this in the community. And what it is, transparent shape at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think there's a great presentation. I've just not seen it. I don't remember if it's Ken or Kevin. Yeah, it's awesome. And I think he'll pull some of the shapes that he's done. And if you haven't seen it, it's awesome.
Yep, matter of fact, I think I got that link. I can even show it to you guys. Yes, that's what I mean. There's a few folks in the community, the Florida tool have a bunch of stuff that's incredibly good. But yes, the concept of a transparent shape, think about this. I don't have time right now. You open up PowerPoint, you bring in a little square shape. It's a default blue or black color. You change the color to be invisible. You turn the opacity down all the way. You click save. That's a transparent shape. That's all that is. That's all I've done here. But why would we use it in Tableau and what good does it do? I'll show you. I'm going to change the drop-down selection in the marks card to shape. It's going to default to a Tableau shape that I don't want, which is a circle. We'll click on the shape icon. I'm going to go to more shapes. Now you will have to load your shapes in. I've got basically, this is something, we can walk you through how to create shapes in Tableau. I got a link here to do that as well. That's pretty easy. But I've got a little section called transparent. There's something there. It's just transparent. It's just a box and it's literally just click transparent. So even though you can't see it, I'm going to click on it and I'm just going to basically say, basically say apply. That should make it go away. So now what I've done basically, change shape out from default to transparent. Yeah, okay, so that's what we did. All right, so basically the little circle went away and it looks the same way it did before, but in reality, the circle didn't go away. It got replaced by an invisible square. Does that make a difference to anyone? No, but when someone clicks, now it looks like this. This just looks better. It really does. Now you can do this or you can do the blank box in front of it, but both of them to me are better options than Tableau's default behavior. Again, just a transparent shape. I'm going to jump to the other two because transparent shapes, transparent colors, and transparent, there's the third one. Transparent, I want to say it's text. Yeah, you're looking crazy, but those three came in very, very handy. And like I said, you're not going to find any of them on the Tableau help site. No offense.
I prefer to disguise anything that should not be a selectable element that doesn't drive an action. I tend to hide it behind something transparent so that it doesn't give you a illusion I should do something. It's just it's a UI trick to keep your users from getting.
All right, instead of 3, I'm going to do 4 because this is another one of those ones I wish people, but then again, if you want to go. I don't want to hold anyone up. Add a hyperlink to text and web edit only. I'm going to get to the transparent color and the transparent text. You can do this. This is literally just a text box where we literally have some text and we've got a hyperlink in there. You probably also know that even if you wanted to, there is no way for me to actually take the hyperlink and kind of embed it in a word so that when they click on the word text, it'll take them to this link as opposed to having to put the whole URL. You cannot do that in Tableau Desktop. Don't try, don't bother, just don't. You can't do it, but you can do it in WebEd. I don't know why, but this works. So there's nothing I can do here to show you that basically what I want to show you. But I've got the same dashboard over here, and I want to show you basically what you can do in web edit mode that you can't do in Tableau desktop, and why this is just something that everybody should know. All right, so this is the exact same. Okay, this is the exact same dashboard that we were looking at in desktop. The only difference is this is on Tableau Public, so this won't matter. Tableau Public, Tableau On-Prem, Tableau Cloud, unless you're like 7 versions behind, everything I've shown you, you'll be fine with. Unless you're on like 2019 point something, you should be good. Now, again, like I said, don't try this in desktop, but basically here in the web, what I'm going to do, same thing, I'm going to say edit text. Now, this is a little strange the way it works, but it does work. I got a little notepad open. I just have tableau.com. I'm literally just going to hover over it. It's going to say edit and say copy. And basically now I'm going to just choose a word. We'll say Tableau website right here. And basically at that point, I'm just going to do a Control-V to do a paste. Now, that just happened. It was quick. You might not even seen it, but now I even have a prompt. I just made Tableau website something that's clickable with a box to actually change and edit the URL going forward. Again, this works. I can click OK, and that's now clickable. You cannot do this in desktop. Don't bother. Don't ever be like, how did he did it in cloud? They just know. I wrapped my head around it. I asked developers. It only works in the cloud. I don't even know. Maybe these guys know.
It's not the only feature that is better in web operating.
I think they forgot about it. I think it was something that someone did years ago, and it's never got to back. Never come back to it again.
It's a migration.
Yeah. So it's just been in there ever since. Yeah. That's why I don't think you'll see any text about it. I don't know if it's officially supported, but it works, and it's worked consistently. It's something to be mindful of. Yeah. But again, don't bother trying in desktop. So let's jump around. Oh, quick ones. Pooja Gandhi is Tableau Hall of Fame. I want to say she's a Tableau Zen Master. Oh, she's not Hall of Fame? Well, she was a Tableau visionary Zen Master at one point, right?
Yes.
Okay. And she's got good stuff on Pluralsight as well. She does a lot of these kind of design stuff like you see here on the left side. If you ever want to know, and that's why I'm saying how to do these text boxes, Pooja Gandhi style. Again, this is an optical illusion. It's a lot easier than you think. Just draw one box and then just put a text box with no outline around it, kind of break it up. Like that's just an optical illusion. Very easy to create, but it does kind of create a nice effect if you ever want to do something like that. All right, let's wrap this up because we're running a little late here. So let's just jump into some of the transparent characters. That's what it was. What is the transparent character and why would you care? This is an example. This is a crosstab table, whatever you want to call it. We've got some numbers, and most of the time when we're talking about any kind of numbers or any kind of grid where you're showing percentages or values and things of that nature, there's a legitimate reason why I want to keep all of it right aligned, especially when we're talking about decimal places and things of that nature. But you'll notice all of my values are right aligned and my headers are center aligned. It would be nice if I can make my values center aligned, but not centered, meaning I still want to keep the right alignment so the decimal places are in the right spot, but I want it kind of in the middle of each column. You can do that with transparent characters. Google transparent characters, you'll see a bunch of articles around, and that's not a Tableau thing. Transparent characters, literally, it's an ASCII code thing. I think that's the way you describe it. But to give you an example, I've got a transparent character right here in this title. Like it says copy the space in between the quotes. That's not a space bar. That's actually a transparent character. I'm going to do a Control-C. I'm going to say OK, and then I'm basically going to go into text here, and I'm going to click on the little prompt, and I'm going to put transparent character after measure value. I'm going to do a Control-V once, and then another one, and click OK, and you're going to notice it moved, but it's still right aligned. Transparent characters, you can do stuff like this. So again, it could come in handy if you're building spreadsheet type tables in Tableau. Just something to be mindful of. Just a transparent character. What's happening is there's really characters after these values. They're just invisible. So that's all that's happening. It's nothing special. It's nothing like, super fancy or anything like that. All right. I'm going to say one more tip or two more, and then if anyone wants more, I can do more after that. But that's kind of what you guys know. The same thing. Okay, supersized bands, another one of those ones. You might think like right now we've got a big ass number, 14,915,601. What if I want to make that bigger? I can't, right? Because right now it's 72, and that's doesn't go any further than that. I can only make it 72. That's the biggest you can get, right? Wrong. You can't make it bigger. You just can't make it bigger in Tableau. Take whatever you have in the calculation editor window, probably shouldn't be saying this, open up Microsoft Word or any Word document if you want, it wouldn't really matter. Highlight everything and make it as big as you want. Let's make this like 125. All right, nice and big. Let's go copy it, go back to Tableau, paste this back in here, and apply. We've got a really big number. Supersized text. Works. Again, you're not going to find this on the help section. Don't bother trying. I wish I could tell you why, but don't bother trying.
Could you give me a use case for that?
Yeah, I mean, I could, because like if it said wisdom.
Different three guys or
Yeah, super size text. Hide off screen. This comes in handy. If you ever notice, I promise, this and then the last one. I know I'm like, because some of these I think are pretty good.
You getting excited?
I know.
You're waiting for oysters.
Okay, here's an example. I got a box. What if I want to drag this black box over there to the right where I've got all that text? I actually can't. It literally won't let me do that. So how did I get all that stuff over there on the right side to begin with? You can't drag things off the canvas, but you can place them with coordinates. Like if I said 900 as far as the X coordinate, it'll go. I actually still can't move this. Like if I try to just move it again, it'll give me that broken kind of thing. But I can move it with coordinates. This comes in handy depending on your use case. Anything that's off the canvas, an end user will never see. When you publish this, they'll never see it. They'll never know it was there. But anyone who has edit access, any other Tableau developers, they will see it. You can have instructions over here. You can have things that say, again, end users never gonna see anything off the canvas. People who can edit the dashboard, open it up in Tableau Desktop or in Web Edit can see all of this. You could have filters off canvas for this reason, so that only a certain subset of people could ever change it. The end user doesn't even know any of that exists because it's off the canvas. So again, anything you put off the canvas will never show to a user. But like I said, just like you can see it here in Tableau Desktop and even in Web Edit, there are use cases and it does come in handy. Okay, last tip, and then I know we're out of here. Sorry, I won't you guys. Transparent color. This is tough because I want to try to show you what's happening here. Right now, you can use a transparent color via an 8-digit hex decimal color code. This is gonna sound weird, but look what we can do with this kind of stuff. Like, I don't know if you knew you could do stuff like this, and an even better use case is kind of an example like over here. I want January to be red and the rest of the months to be a gradual shade of blue based on the sales value. This is actually accurate. January is red because I just made January red, but January could be controlled by a parameter. So you could have a parameter drive the red value. But if you notice, it's in chronological order because it's kind of, a date at the bottom. It is actually, the darker blue is the higher value and the lower blue is the lighter blue is the lower value. The trick to this is two parts. I'll show you the first part in a second, but the second part is the real more important one. This is a dual axis chart. I want to show you, if I take the dual axis off, it looks like there's only one bar in the second one, and the top one has kind of all bars. There are bars here. They're just invisible. It's kind of that same trick we did before. And because they're invisible, I can pull off a trick like this because this is just, the first one is literally just a bar chart, just sorted in descending order based on the sum of sales. But the other one is one that I'm only making one visible and I'm making all the others invisible. And then to your point, now you have a way to kind of get a little creative with this kind of stuff. It's not that hard to do this. At the end of the day, if you ever open up the preference file, most, if not all of the color codes are going to be 6-digit. Add 2 zeros to the end of any color code, makes it transparent. This is the only one that works. There are other like transparent codes, none of them worked. The only one that worked was just the 2-digit one. But you add 2 zeros after any of those color codes, makes it transparent. You can pull off this effect. And
all the secrets.
That's smart.
you don't work anymore. Now I can tell everybody. And this is stuff that people should know. This is not even like,
No reason to call slalom now. You already shouldn't have worried.
Yeah, there was one more I wanted to show you that's based on this one, the first part of that kind of bar. But if anyone has any questions, let me know. But this is the last tip, and then, like I said, we'll kind of wrap it up. All right. So the second part was making that transparent color. This is the first part. I want to make January red, the rest of the month a gradual shade of blue. How would we do that? I'm just going to take I'm going to hold Control so I can duplicate it. I'm going to drag it on top of color. And darn it, it took let's reset this. Okay, This is what it would normally look like if I just took a field for the first time and dropped it on color. So that's kind of what you would normally see. I'm gonna go back to the color marks card and say edit colors. I'm gonna make January red, just like we said. Then I'm gonna go to something that's more of a sequential, like it just, where it's just one name there. Instead of blue, I'll say like green. Now that I've got all these ranges of green, I'm gonna click February, I'm gonna hold the shift key and I'm gonna click December. And then I'm gonna say assign power. And what that's gonna do, January's red, we've got a gradual shade of a color for all the other months. In conjunction with that other tip that I showed you, the transparent color, that's how we pulled off that last tab and kind of the effect that you saw here. I think I can make this Google Access again. But with that, you know, I don't know if that's working. I think it is.
Looks good.
Yeah. Any other questions? Anyone want any other tips? Let me know. But if not, 7:15, we kept you here long enough. I want to thank the Wiiisdom guys. I want to thank Jeremy. I want to thank all of you guys. I'm Rashid, and hopefully I didn't keep you long.
Everybody,
Like 2 hours.
All right, virtual audience, you are dismissed.
You said this is on Tableau Public?